Hello everyone, first news update for 14th of April. Now it's 9:30 in the morning Moscow time, and I have prepared quite a number of news that Russian media and public paid attention to in previous 12 to 24 hours, and I hope you will find this update informative and useful. And if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary that might help with the algorithm. And also please consider to support my work and this independent media project from Russia if you can, with donation through PayPal or Boosty, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. That's in case you like my work, of course. And let's go through some news now. And first, I'll give you this report from RIA Novosti that overnight, early hours of this morning, air defense systems on duty intercepted 52 drones that were launched by Kyiv regime with assistance of NATO member states to strike deep into Russian territory. 33 drones were intercepted over the Bryansk region, 10 drones over the Oryol region, 3 drones over the Kursk and Tula regions each, 2 drones over the Kaluga region, 1 drone over the territory of Belgorod region. At this point, no detailed information about casualties or more or less significant damage. If any update on that, of course, I will share additional information on my Telegram channel and Twitter X page. TASS news agency is also reporting that Russian Defense Ministry confirmed information that Russian air defense systems intercepted US-made F-16 fighter jet that was transferred to Kyiv regime. This happened according to reports from independent sources in the Sumy region 2 days ago, day before yesterday, I believe, and I reported about this in previous updates, but we did not have until now confirmation from Defense Ministry of this successful strike. RIA Novosti is also reporting that Russian armed forces liberated their Yelizavetovka settlement in DPR. Let me show you on the map, dear friends. This is, I believe, Pokrovsk direction, and it is. So this is our Elizavetovka settlement, and this is Pokrovsk city here, and Mirnograd. Right next to it, this is Pokrovsk-Mirnograd agglomeration, and Russian troops continue improving their positions on daily basis all along the front line, basically. Although some may argue that some sort of operational pause has been established on the battlefield, and I can see that argument, but still on daily basis practically we are receiving reports about more and more settlements, more and more areas being liberated from Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky. Also, we have information from military expert Andrei Marochko, who stated that during their previous week, just in territories of LNR and their surrounding areas, Kyiv regime's forces lost about 6,000 troops. So Russian servicemen have killed more than 6,000 soldiers of the armed forces of Ukraine and foreign mercenaries in a week during their battles near the borders of the Lugansk People's Republic. The greatest damage to the enemy was inflicted by the fighters of the North Group of Forces. Military expert Andrei Marochko told us, and this is just one sector of the front line, by the way. You can imagine the level of losses on part of Kyiv regime all along the front line. Also, no wonder Kyiv regime is now preparing ground for mobilization, forceful mobilization of not just younger generation people from 18 to 25, but also they want women, females to be conscripted. So the Ukrainian presidential administration's deputy head, Colonel Pavel Poliser, has voiced support for mandatory conscription for women, driving inspiration from the Israeli approach. Ukraine is facing shortage of troops, leading enlistment officers to employ aggressive tactics shown in numerous eyewitnesses videos. It's basically kidnapping. It's a forceful mobilization and a kidnapping, and I shared on my Telegram channel and Twitter X page numerous, countless basically videos of these kidnappings that was depicted on videos by eyewitnesses And I guess Kyiv regime, out of desperation, and its NATO backers, globalists, are preparing ground now to forcefully mobilize their female stores. So they're going to continue this proxy war against Russia until, I guess, anyone is left there in Kyiv-controlled territory that can be forcefully mobilized, which is a tragedy, of course. But yet again, that's what Western ruling class does. And their proxies. TASS news agency is also reporting that Ukrainian armed forces killed their own officer who was negotiating surrender. So the Ukrainian armed forces killed their own officer who was negotiating with the Russian troops for a purpose of voluntary surrendering on the territory of their St. Nicholas Belogorsky monastery. This was reported to TASS by Russian security agencies. A few days ago, we learned that the Ukrainian armed forces officer who was negotiating with the Russian side was brutally murdered on the territory of the monastery complex, along with the Ukrainian paratrooper. Several of his fellow soldiers who supported their only correct decision, which is, of course, to contact Russian side and surrender. So, I'm afraid this is not the first and not the last instance. There are documented cases, by the way, when drones were actually filming when Kyiv regime's forces, foreign mercenaries, neo-Nazi formations especially, are deployed close to battlefield, and they are executing basically and targeting units of Kyiv regime's forces that are contacting Russian side, and they're trying to organize a safe surrender. And this is just one more case of that. TASS news agency is also reporting about explosions that occurred in Sumy yesterday. In the central part of Sumy, there was two explosions. One explosion was targeting building in which 117th Brigade of the Kyiv regime's forces were organizing some event. Awards should be given to some of the Kyiv regime's militants and that kind of stuff. Unfortunately, civilians were there also, and there are quite a number of public figures in Kyiv-controlled territory straight away once this strike happened start attacking regime of Kyiv regime and representatives of the regime for organizing such events in densely populated areas, which is not the first time had happened. And for example, we have this report here that explosions in Sumy occurred in a place where there was a concentration of the military personnel. This follows from the statement by Верховная Rada, which is a parliament of so-called parliament of so-called Ukraine. So this follows from the statement of Верховная Rada deputy Mariana Bizugler, some extreme Russophobic element, by the way. According to her, the military was gathered for the award ceremony. The deputy accused the SBU, which is a security service or secret service of the Kyiv regime, secret police. So deputy accused the SBU of leaking information, which resulted in a strike. Earlier, the Ukrainian publication Общественное reported there were two explosions in Sumy during an air raid alert in the region. Later, Ukrainian media published photos and also videos showing several severe damage to the building of the Congress Center of Sumy State University and also surrounding areas. Unfortunately, there was a significant number of casualties among civilians. I saw some videos, pictures, and of course, death of civilians always is a tragedy. Although, by the way, I have some questions about this whole situation because first strike was seems like was a strike with the ballistic missile, potentially Iskander-M or something like that, and there was a really significant damage done to a building. But what happened next is that Kyiv regime started almost straight away spreading information that Russia targeted the central part of Sumy with a missile that had a cluster warhead. warhead with cluster munition, which is not true, by the way. You cannot cause such a damage to buildings, massive buildings, with the cluster warheads. It's just not possible, right? And when second explosion occurred, which occurred on a nearby territory and killed a significant number of civilians and wounded significant number of civilians. When I was monitoring all the situation, all the news that was coming in, I could not help but think that maybe Kyiv regime actually targeted civilians, their own civilians. This is not going to be first case of that, and I'm afraid not the last case. We all remember Kramatorsk situation when Blinken, at the time head of State Department of US, I believe he was visiting Kiev, and the Kiev regime launched missile towards a market area in Kramatorsk, and military experts basically designated straight away that this missile, this strike, based on objective control, was launched by a Kiev regime, right? As a result of which there was also casualties among civilians. And I think maybe something similar had happened in Sumy, because it was just a couple of minutes since these explosions, and number of, not just Kiev regime, but a bunch of so-called leaders of the NATO member states start coming up with their somewhat similar statements. And I mean, that was that was quite strange, to say the least, right? How did they know anything at all in 5, 10, 15 minutes time? It's just not possible. I get the impression that this provocation was pre-planned, right? And these so-called leaders of the NATO member states, Macron, Stammer, and others, they already knew what they're gonna say. And Macron, by the way, while commenting on the strike on Sumy, went as far as to say that they have to force Russia to ceasefire or something. This psychopath, Macron, was actually threatening Russia with force. let him try. Let him try, and they will find out. But I think it is highly likely that this was a terrorist attack of Kyiv regime on its own civilians to derail talks about the escalation, especially between Moscow and Washington. Maybe this is the case because, I was saying in the previous update that most likely Kyiv regime and the globalists and the puppets of the globalists in European states, first of all France and the UK, will go all the way with the provocations, with the terrorist activity to somehow derail talks between Moscow and Washington. So maybe that was the case. I don't know. Let's wait and see. Maybe Russian defense ministry will make a statement on that. For now, I didn't see any statements, and I think defense ministry is gathering information because they know they didn't target civilians. They targeted their exact place where militaries were gathering. So from where this second explosion came from? And by the way, I saw a video of that second explosion, and you know what? Iskander has about, I don't know, from 500 to 1,000 tons of explosives, right, in the warhead. Iskander explosion would level everything in that area. So damage that I see on the streets was more similar to HIMARS missile strike, which has a much lower warhead, much less capable warhead, but still it's a warhead, right? Because if it was Iskander, by the way, Iskanders can demolish entire buildings, by the way, right? So it did not look like Iskander strike. Although, of course, I would not deny that, unfortunately, there are some malfunction. You cannot give 100% guarantee that some missiles will not malfunction or something will not happen and collateral damage will not occur. This is high intensity conflict after all. But But still, I mean, I think Kiev regime and the British secret services were involved in this provocation. Let's wait. By the way, this is my take on the situation. Let's wait if Russian Defense Ministry will come up with their statement and their factual evidences that this was Kiev regime and its NATO backers. Anyways, let's continue with some more news. And this morning, this information broke that Russian Security Service (FSB) detained their Ukrainian agent who brought explosives into Russian territory to conduct terrorist attacks. So the Russian FSB reported the arrest of Ukrainian military intelligence agent, Moldavian citizen Marius Prunianu, who previously fought in the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces and who came to Russia from Moldova via Latvia with the bombs to commit terrorist attacks. The Federal Security Service, FSB, of the Russian Federation has stopped the illegal activities of the citizen of Republic of Moldova, Marius Prunianu, born in 2001, who arrived in Russia on assignment from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine to organize sabotage and terrorist acts, the statement says. And I shared on my Telegram, by the way, and Twitter X page, video of arrest of this person. So that's explosives, some detonators, as far as I understand. And this is this terrorist, dirty freaking terrorist from Moldova that was working for main intelligence directorate of Kiev regime's defense ministry. He's gonna regret his decisions, big time. So it has been established that in the period of 2022-2023, this Moldavian terrorist that worked for Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, took part in the combat operations against the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the Bakhmut district of the Donetsk People's Republic as a part of Special Operations Center of their Special Operations Forces, which is the main intelligence directorate of so-called Defense Ministry of Kiev regime, by the way. He was a part of International Legion, which is operating under the umbrella of main intelligence directorate. According to Russian security services, this terrorist, Prunianu, was recruited in December 2023 by an employee of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of so-called Ukraine, given their pseudonym Max, and transferred to Moldova to prepare terrorist attacks in Russia. The FSB provided details of the preparations of the crime. During their preparations for departure to the Russian Federation, curator from their Ukrainian Special Services Ukrainian Secret Services handed over funds to Prunian in Chinsau, which is Chisinau, by the way, capital of Moldova, with which he purchased their Toyota Land Cruiser Prado vehicle with their Moldavian license plate K088ED, in which the main intelligence directorate of their Ministry of Defense of Kiev regime equipped a hiding place in the form of battery containing three explosive devices based on their plastic explosive substance C4. I mean, many members of our community are familiar with such a name of explosive, C4. It's a military grade explosive, of course. These explosives were 1.6 kilogram each. So you can imagine damage that could be done with such IDs, right? With such explosives. 1.6 kilogram of C4 was in each explosive, in each this ID, improvised explosive device. Also, there was a free safety activating mechanisms based on the electronic clock, free detonators of their EDP type, and free keys for closing the electronic circuit, the report says. under instructions of the Ukrainian Special Services, Ukrainian Secret Services, in 2024, the defendant arrived in Russia in their specified vehicle along the route Moldova, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia to plant weapons in caches in Volgograd and Saratov, but was detained by security officers. According to the plan of Ukrainian Special Services, the delivered explosive devices were to be used to commit sabotage and terrorist acts in the Russian Federation, the FSB said. And just look at the territories, by the way, that these terrorists crossed with these explosives. Moldova, Romania, which is an EU and NATO member state, Hungary, which is EU and NATO member state, Slovakia, EU and NATO member state, Poland, also EU and NATO member state, Lithuania and Latvia, also EU and NATO member states. One should ask question what the security services of these countries are doing. I mean, these terrorists crossed with 5 kilos of C4, almost half of Europe, and he was not detained. What security services of these countries are doing? I don't know. But by the way, Europe is about to face Ukrainian terrorism big time. That's for sure. Because obviously Ukrainian Nazis, fascists, and the terrorists are eventually gonna turn their attention to the West, because they will blame West for their failure, for their inevitable defeat, especially when Ukraine will undergo full-scale disintegration, which is absolutely inevitable in my personal opinion. And well, the Western countries, European countries, first of all, gonna face the consequences of their own actions, because it's them, EU and NATO member states from Europe and from North America, that trained, armed, and financed these terrorists and their Nazis in so-called Ukraine. Correct? Let's continue with some more news. RT is reporting that, well, yesterday, this news was making some waves on the internet, in the media field. The news that came from CNN Turk, that was about Russian and Ukrainian negotiations that should take place in Turkey. So information was that Russian and Ukrainian representatives will hold direct talks in Ankara next week. CNN Turk has reported, citing sources in the Turkish Defense Ministry. Delegations from the two countries will meet to discuss security in the Black Sea, the outlet said in an article on Sunday. And well, as I said, this news was making waves on internet, in the media field, including here in Russia, by the way, and many people were confused. And I saw on in Russian segment of internet, by the way, whenever Russian language channels, for example on Telegram, published this news, dislikes were overwhelmingly more than likes. Overwhelmingly more, which is understandable. After all, Russian Defense Ministry on daily basis reports that Kyiv regime is breaching so-called energy ceasefire, literally on daily basis, right? And in such a situation, to conduct negotiations with very same regime on a Black Sea initiative or Black Sea ceasefire does not make no sense whatsoever, right? So public that did pay attention to this developments was quite upset, but later on clarification came in. And for example, Turkish Ministry of National Defense shared information about all these situations. So Turkish Ministry of National Defense will hold a meeting in Ankara on April 15-16 with military representatives of the foreign countries on issues of shipping safety in the Black Sea. Meeting on security issues in the Black Sea in light of a possible ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine will be held on April 15-16 at the headquarters of the Turkish Naval Forces Command. Military representatives of the foreign countries will take a part in it, and the naval aspect of military planning for maintaining peace in the Black Sea will be discussed. So Turkish militaries did not say nothing about talks between representatives of the Russian Federation and the Kiev regime. So this outlet, CNN Turk, was probably misled, mistaken, let's say, and therefore they start misleading the public worldwide. And later on, yesterday, so-called foreign minister of Ukraine, Sybiga, made a statement on this topic and said that, I mean, there are no plans for any talks. Russian side did not even comment on this matter. So Ukrainian foreign minister Andrei Sybiga has not confirmed plans to hold a meeting in Ankara between representatives of Kiev and Moscow on the topic of security in the Black Sea. Ukrainian TV channel TSN reported, citing their minister's comment. So yes, even though this whole topic was making headlines, it turned out later on that it was fake news all along, and CNN Turk just messed up. RIA Novosti, although meeting itself in Turkey will take place of the military representatives of militaries of number of countries, maybe Russian Defense Ministry will send delegation there, possibly. Why not? After all, it's going to be talks about Black Sea, right? But it's not going to be talks about the so-called Black Sea initiative that was generated by Trump and his team. Anyways, let's continue. And well, RIA Novosti is reporting that future Chancellor of Germany once again start talking about deliveries of Taurus long-range cruise missiles to Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky. Although he's playing around the topic, naming some preconditions for that, but I guess he will go ahead with deliveries of Taurus missiles. It's a possibility, and when I saw this news this morning, I commented that maybe it is really time for Russia to take some action, and maybe even authorize preemptive strikes on military bases and military-industrial complex of their number of hostile countries that are clearly need to be put in place. Maybe it is time. What we are waiting for, I don't know. But news is that Taurus cruise missiles can be delivered to Ukraine only after coordination with the European partners. The leader of the CDU-CSU bloc and likely future German Chancellor Friedrich Merz said in an interview with the IRD television channel, "I have always said that I will do this only in coordination with the European partners." He said, according to Merz, the delivery of the Taurus must be coordinated, and if it is coordinated, then Germany must participate. So basically, I guess decision has already been made on transfer of these Taurus missiles to Kiev control territory, and about deployment of German militaries that can operate with these missiles, right? And therefore, I mean, question is rising, by the way. Dear friends, you tell me what you think, but does Russia has a right to defend itself and to conduct some preemptive strikes, if necessary, with whatever force, to make sure that these psychopaths that are in charge, or going to be in charge of number of NATO member states, will not endanger thousands, potentially tens of thousands of Russian citizens, if not the millions. Because who knows, those Taurus missiles, maybe those missiles will be launched towards some nuclear power station deep into Russia. Where is the guarantees that this is not going to be the case? When we all know that Western ruling class is basically got a bunch of terrorists, right? Mass murderers and the terrorists. So I have a question. Does Russia has a right to conduct some preemptive strike and basically demilitarize quite effectively number of NATO member states that pose existential threat to Russia and Russian citizens, including Germany, by the way? I think Russia has every right to defend itself. And I mean, if Western ruling class will continue to escalate, I guess even Russian current leadership that demonstrates extreme patience. I mean, extreme patience, by the way, and restraint. I guess even Russian current leadership will be forced to actually take some strong actions, because this is just too dangerous, by the way. And I remind you, dear friends, that Taurus long-range missiles have a range. Taurus cruise missiles have a range of 500 plus kilometers. So it's quite a range, right? Storm Shadow and Scalp PG missiles have about 300 kilometer range. British and French cruise missiles. And lately, there was no reports about launches of those missiles. And I guess that's because, first of all, Kiev regime lacks planes, platforms that can launch those missiles. And secondly, UK and France basically run out of stocks. They can no longer transfer those missiles to Kiev regime, because at least they have to have for themselves some number of these missiles, right? They cannot send all of it to Kiev regime. So therefore, I guess our topic of Taurus missiles that are made by Germany will be activated once again. And yet again, as I already said, Western ruling class and their puppets, globalists and their puppets, including this potentially future chancellor of Germany, and other puppets of the globalists in UK, in France, in other countries, they might actually force extremely patient Russian leadership to take some extremely strong actions. We don't want that to happen. We don't want escalation. We want de-escalation. But, I mean, if it comes to it, then you have to do what you have to do. That's it. And globalists clearly are pushing towards their demise, towards their end. I mean, they are more suicidal than I was thinking of, you know, it seems like. Anyways, let's continue, dear friends. RIA Novosti is reporting that Trump calls Ukraine conflict Biden's war. So US President Donald Trump called the Ukrainian conflict a war of former US President Joe Biden, which he is trying to stop in order to save many lives. This is a Biden's war. We have a quote here. This is a Biden's war. This is not my war. This is the war that was under Biden. I'm just trying to stop it so we can save a lot of lives. The American president told the reporters of the White House pool. He spoke about it, I believe, on Air Force One. And yes, it is a Biden's war, but this war is this proxy war that West is waging against Russia is more increasingly becoming Trump's war too. It's a globalist war, by the way. It's a Western ruling class that waging this proxy war against Russia, and the puppets of the globalists in the governments of collective West countries, including US, are doing the bidding of their Western ruling class or the globalists. One may argue that in US situation has changed and the pro-American forces are now in charge, but okay, even if so, they still continue to play, to obey orders of the globalists, because US did not stop providing weapons, providing munition, providing intelligence to Kiev regime. So therefore, this war is a Trump's war too now, right? I mean, it's just factual. And that's why I'm always saying that in no circumstances US or US leadership should be considered rather as a mediators in this proxy war, because they are party of the war and the main party, I will argue. Still, although, of course, Trump's administration, Trump himself, forces that are behind them, these pro-American forces or whatever, if they are brave enough, they might actually make some changes. They might actually say, you know what, no more. This is not in US interest. Previous administration was acting on the orders of the globalists, but we're not going to do this bidding, and so we are out of this proxy war. And in that case, there could be negotiations, real negotiations, meaningful negotiations between Washington and Moscow. Washington could and should agree on the concessions before Russia for all the damage that was done by US to Russian citizens during involvement of this country in this proxy war. And after that, relationships between Moscow and Washington may actually start improving. I mean, at least towards the level of their working relationships. It is understandable that Russia and US never going to become friends, right? We're never going to have friendly relationships, or we're not going to be strategical partners. It's obvious, but not in the upcoming decades at least. But we should not be hostiles too. That's also true, isn't it? Russia and US, there is not even single reason. There is not even single objective reason why should Russia and the US should be hostile towards each other. It is what it is, man. TASS news agency meanwhile is reporting that Kremlin spokesman says that Russia US make good progress in reestablishing relations. Okay, I'm a bit skeptical of that, but okay, Russia and US are making good headway in reestablishing their relations. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told the Russian TV host Pavel Zarubin the whole path consists of small steps to recreate an atmosphere of their least minimal mutual trust. To strengthen their mutual trust, the spokesman went on to say, this is what is being done now by the special services. Communication is taking place between the foreign ministry and their State Department. According to Peskov, talks between Russia and US have a lot of nuances related to resumption of the normal operations of their diplomatic missions. And he also said that recent visit of Witkov and their talks between Witkov and Russian President Witkov and their other Russian representatives were basically a step towards a Putin-Trump meeting. Okay, I mean, this might be the case, okay, but still, until Washington stops sending weapons to terrorist regime of Zelensky, until Washington stops sending munition to those terrorists and intelligence, I'm skeptical. I'm gonna stay skeptical that even little improvement of the relationships between Washington and Moscow is a possibility. When US will stop acting hostile towards Russia, when US leadership agrees on concessions, which is absolutely necessary so that Russia will not seek retaliation, right? So concessions have to be immense, absolutely immense, so that Russian public will not seek revenge, right? So after US will agree on that, then maybe we will see some real improvement of the relationships, and maybe countries will move closer to at least to reach at least working level in relationships. But now, no, I am skeptical. I understand that Peskov is a press spokesman of the Russian president, and he is a diplomatic, and he is trying to paint the picture that it's all good. By the way, I mean, these talks at least not doing no damage, no harm, right? And if anything comes out of it, it's going to be something of positive. And I can see this logic. Okay, these talks don't really harm, right? And maybe some good will come out of it. Okay, but yet again, if we're talking about some real steps forward until US stops supplying weapons, munition, intelligence to Western-backed terrorist regime of Zelensky, and until US agrees on concessions before Russia, there's gonna be no real progress on the ground. That's my belief, by the way. You tell me what is your take on the situation, but that's how I see the picture. Vzгляд newspaper is reporting that Netanyahu calls Macron's plan to recognize Palestine a mistake. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu expressed dissatisfaction with the French President Emmanuel Macron's intention to recognize Palestine as a state and call it a serious mistake. And you know what? I don't think Macron gonna recognize anything, right? He is a puppet of Rothschilds, right? And the Rothschilds are basically one of the creators of Israel. And I mean, they are a significant force inside the Zionism movement, right? So, I mean, can you imagine that a puppet of Zionists actually doing something against this main project that Zionists have, Israel? No, it's not happening. Macron is just playing games, by the way, and how anybody can take anything that comes out of from Macron seriously, man. This guy today can say one thing, tomorrow another, next day something completely different. It's a total moron and a clown, right? It's a shame that France, this great country, by the way, I mean, with great history, has such a clown as a president, and it's a kind of tradition nowadays, right? After Mitterrand, after Chirac, France did not really have a decent heavyweight president, because I mean, Sarkozy was a clown, Hollande was a clown, by the way, and now this one, Macron. Vzglyad newspaper is also reporting that Houthis shut down US MQ-9 drone in Yemen. So military political movement Ansar Allah announced, also known as the Houthi rebels, announced that they intercepted MQ-9 recognition drone, noting that this is the fourth such operation in their past 2 weeks, and I believe 19th since the beginning of US military campaign against Yemen, against Yemeni Houthis. And each drone, by the way, according to some report, costs about 30 million. So you do the math, by the way. I mean, 19 drones, each about 30 million. That's quite stuff. Nothing to be said about all the weapons, bombs, missiles that were launched against Yemen. Nothing to be said about cost of operation of their militaries in the Red Sea or in the surrounding areas. So US most likely already spent billions and billions on this operation against the Houthi rebels. And no wonder reports are that DOGE most likely will struggle to meet its initial goal when it comes to efficiency or cutting their spending, federal spending. We have this report, for example, that US Department of their Government Efficiency, which according to its head Elon Musk will help the government save about 15% of their initially stated amount, may bring even less due to errors in the calculations, the New York Times reports, citing an analyst of the department's statement. And by the way, of course, they're not gonna succeed much. I mean, this DOGE, they might cut some spendings here and there, but as long as Pentagon and the so-called intelligence services are receiving hundreds of billions of dollars, and recently there was reports that Pentagon budget for Pentagon gonna go $1 trillion, right? Until this is the case, by the way, until military-industrial complex of US, due to their huge influence over the political class, until they are basically, stealing hundreds of trillions of, trillions of taxpayers' dollars, nothing gonna change, and DOG not really gonna achieve much. And I think Elon Musk will realize that quite soon, and he will step down. Remember, I said quite some time ago that maximum year, and probably Elon Musk will be gone from this newly created institution, and I guess this is going to be the case, right? Before US will change its current economical model, current economical system, in which military-industrial complex, these multinational corporations have enormous influence, and they are actually stealing trillions of dollars of the taxpayers' money instead of this money being spent on infrastructure and on development. I mean, nothing gonna change. Nothing gonna change in general. I mean, they can cut some few billions for this department and that department, but Come on, man. You have a Pentagon, right? That will have a budget of trillion now. If you add all 30 or 30 plus intelligence services that US is operating with, this number will reach most likely 1,500 billion, which is 1.5 trillion, right? And I mean, US just don't have that much money. So as long as this is the case, the US is going to continue to print more and more dollars. Dollar itself going to become less and less valued worldwide. And if you take in account all the global situation, all these illegal tariffs, illegal sanctions, including on Russia, weaponization of the Western financial and the banking system and Western currencies, including dollar, I mean, US is going to struggle. US is going to end up in a difficult place, by the way. Right? They have to change from within, and they have to start for real doing these changes, not just for public, not just play games for the public. RT is reporting on very same topic, by the way. RT is reporting that her head of world's largest hedge fund fears global financial system collapse. And why no one should be surprised about it? Of course, risk is high. Billionaire investor Ray Dalio has warned that the United States is facing economic risk far greater than a typical recession, arguing that US President Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policies and ballooning debt could trigger breakdown of the global financial system. Speaking on their NBC's Meet the Press on Sunday, the founder of the Bridgewater Association, or Bridgewater Associates, said the world is at a critical juncture marked by profound changes in the political, economic, and geopolitical order, factors which, he says, have historically led to a severe crisis. And, well, he has a point. As I already said, weaponization of Western financial and the banking systems, Western currencies, euro, pound, dollar, first of all. Illegal sanctions, by the way, just on Russia, there are tens of thousands of these illegal sanctions, right? Nothing to be said about latest developments, all these tariff wars and that chaos that Trump bring into this world. Of course, risks probably are higher than ever that world economy gonna go past. Not just US economy gonna experience some difficulties, or economies in Europe, but world economy, I mean, they're gonna be worldwide crisis. If all this madness is not stopped. And meanwhile, TASS News Agency is reporting that China suspends exports of some rare earth materials, metals and magnets. So the Chinese authorities have decided to suspend export of some rare earth metals and their magnets in the context of the trade war with the United States, which could negatively affect the global automobile, semiconductor, and aerospace industries. This was reported by the New York Times. So yes, yet another argument that world's economy is moving towards some dodgy place, really, because this economical wars, tariff wars, sanction wars, not gonna benefit nobody, really. And well, this information only confirms, isn't it? Then China can actually further escalate its countermeasures, right, against US or against collective West in general. I guess Russia can buy whatever Russia wants to buy from China. Metals, rare earth metals, or magnets, or whatever. Russia has on its own plenty of it, right? But Western countries, Western companies might experience some significant difficulties due to this proxy war. RT is, and by the way, I guess Trump's administration is realizing that maybe they went way too far. And yesterday, some media outlets were reporting that, according to Trump's administration, there are some initial stages of their negotiations between the US and China to de-escalate, which is good, by the way. If true, this is good, because when two major economies of this world are in a trade war, I mean, it's destructive for both these countries and for entire world, isn't it? I mean, it's just too obvious. So let's hope Washington and Beijing will talk to each other and find some common ground, so that trade between the two will be beneficial for both countries and beneficial for the rest of the world. RT is reporting that UK moves towards nationalizing last steel plant. So the British government has opened the door to nationalizing the last primary steelmaking plant in the UK, an emergency bid to keep its blast furnaces running. According to British steel's owner, Chinese company Jingue, their Scanthrop plant has been operating at a loss of some 700,000 pounds or 916,000 US dollars a day, affected by President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on steel imports into US, massive CO2 emission fees, and their high UK energy prices. So due to all this stuff, company is running with the 700,000 pounds losses on single day. By the way, that's just too much, really. Their factory's parent company reportedly turned down 500 million offer from a British government to keep its blast furnace Virgin Steel production working. On a Saturday, Prime Minister Keir Starmer recalled lawmakers from Easter to pass an emergency bill that would allow the UK to step in and take control of any steel undertaking at risk of stoppage. Such a recall of Parliament has not happened since the Falkland War in 1982. So, well, that's quite a stuff, isn't it? There's only one plant in UK that works on steel, right? Steel manufacturer, and that might get shut down. Furnaces gonna shut down if British government will not find compromise with whomever owns that factory, right? But the news is itself interesting and demonstrates where UK's economy is right now. You know, RT is also reporting that Europeans cancelling trips to US. So the US has suffered a sharp fail in tourism from Europe amid political tensions and the fears of hostile interactions at the US border under the President Donald Trump. Financial Times reporting, and according to Times, by the way, according to statistics, there is a 17% drop. So overnight visitors to the US from Western Europe fell by 17% in March compared to same period of last year, Financial Times wrote, citing a report by the International Trade Administration. Travel from countries such as Ireland, Norway, and Germany dropped by more than a fifth, more than 25%. So yes, maybe this drop in travel from Europe to US somewhat connected with the current administration and fears that they might not get treated well on the border. But I think there are some other reasons. It cannot be that Trump become president and now people don't want to go in US. I don't think this is a real reason. Most likely, economical downfall in Europe, by the way, forces people to reconsider their spendings, their budgets, right? And many people no longer can afford their trips to anywhere, I guess, including US. That might be the more realistic reason. But, Western propaganda outlets, by the way, for example, Financial Times or anyone else, they're going to politicize everything, right? Especially if they are actively engaged in a Trump-hating campaign. Commerçant is also reporting, and I will end this update on this news, dear friends, that the US announces a start of a soft dialogue with China. Yes, that's the news that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So the United States has begun a soft dialogue with China through intermediaries on trade relations. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick stated he expressed confidence that US President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will find a way to resolve their differences in the trade area and let's hope they will. Let's hope they will, because otherwise both countries gonna endure some serious difficulties, and their world economy gonna suffer also. Right, so let's hope Washington and Beijing will find common ground and de-escalate. And this is it for now, dear friends. Hopefully you will find this episode, this update, informative and interesting, useful. And if so, please click that like button, leave some commentary just about anything, any topic. This is only way we can try at least to influence algorithms so that videos will reach wider audience. And if you like my work, if you like my channels, please consider to support her. If you can, of course. You can do it through several means, through donation, through PayPal or Boosted platforms, or by subscribing to my Patreon page. All the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment, including address of crypto wallet in case you are good in with crypto and stuff. So yes, this is it for now. Have a wonderful day, and take care. Bye for now.